Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War Geopolitics News Update. I thought I'd do this live because A, it's Friday night and I've clearly got no other place to be, because B, my partner is at her work's Christmas do tonight and I was not invited. Which is a shame because I'm really good at dancing these days. C, I thought I'd like to have someone to share my. Now, you know, because I've told you enough, that I've been to Lidl, which is a supermarket in the UK. It's actually a German supermarket, to try and get Ukrainian wine. And I got some Ukrainian white wine, which is a good session white wine. Really nice for drink. It's not too overpowering. It's not too delicate. It's just a mid-range session wine that goes very, very nicely down. Thank you very much. And I couldn't get the Ukrainian red wine. They didn't stock it in my local Lidl, but I could get a bottle of Georgian Zaporizhzhia, which is now, as we all know, Georgia is where the first wine was from. So Georgia has a very rich history in viticulture. And I thought, well, let's open that tonight and share that with you guys, not literally, just virtually. So here I am with a little bit of my red. That's very nice. Thank you very much. So I'm in a good place. So I thought I'd share some geopolitics with you. Now, I have to apologize. I have pumped out way too much content today, as I often do. And some of you are just going to be A, sick of listening to my voice, and B, sick of listening to my voice. Is there anything more to say about what's going on in the world? Of course there is. There's always more to say. And so I'm going to say it. So we have the world of geopolitics, what's going on concerning the war in Ukraine, particularly. And we have already seen that the Romanian, I haven't got this lined up, but we do have the Romanian annulment of the presidential elections there, which is really good news. I did a breaking news update on that, and I think that is good and right and proper, and they need to rerun a fair presidential election again, that first round again. I do have JR working in the background, who very kindly is making sure that there are questions for me to interact with if it comes to that. So thank you for him for being there behind the scenes. Okay, so let's start with what I'm going to talk about. Let's get me in the right place. Is that the right place? Or is that the right place? Or is that the right place? Oh no, that's a bit small. Or this, no. Okay, be sensible, Pierce. Come on. Friday night, people don't have time to listen to me be an idiot. So, okay, we are going to start not with Hungary. Actually, that's in the wrong place. We're going to start here, and I wanted to. This isn't geopolitics per se, because this has happened in Ukraine today as a strike on Zaporizhzhia. Zaporizhzhia has been struck, and it's been pretty terrible. There are lots of dead as civilian or commercial infrastructure has been hit. Cars with people in them were burning. There were victims with severed limb, children in blood. So meanwhile, Tucker Carlson is promoting Russian terrorists to the American public. And I just like this from whoever this is, Savchenko Volodymyr. How much of a moral idiot do you have to be to do that, Tucker Carlson? And I just think that that's a really important juxtaposition there, because Tucker Carlson has been platforming Sergei Lavrov, who has been perpetuating Russian myths and lies and saying, you know, the US attacked us. We're the whole kind of like, we're not responsible for that, which is absolute rank nonsense. They invaded a sovereign nation. This whole idea, and I talked about this in my earlier video when I was looking at Piers Morgan's panel, saying, look, you know, you can talk as much as you like about provocation, but when it comes to it, the Russians invaded and have committed war crimes and atrocities. And here's another example of such an atrocity. So you don't get to walk around saying, oh, the US made us do it. They didn't make you do that. It did not make you do that. And it's disgusting. And so I get super angry when, and I don't want to start the video by ranting, but it turns out I already have. Tucker Carlson giving a platform to someone spreading these lies is morally repugnant. And anyway, enough of that. Right, we are going to now go to Norway. So Norway's wealth fund can sell off its Russian stocks. So I'm no great knowledge about wealth funds and whatnot, but Norway's finance ministry has granted its $1.8 trillion wealth fund. So this is what essentially underwrites the entire Norwegian government, their budget, their pensions are paid for through the sovereign wealth fund, which is funded by oil essentially in the North Sea. As I said previously, the Norwegians did a very sensible thing where they said, this is Norwegian oil, so therefore, oil company, we're going to take a cut in everything you drill. And the British government said way back at the same time, we said, oh, you can just go and drill it and we'll occasionally tax you because free market, free market, free market. And it turns out that that's a wrong decision and Norway are doing very well out of it. Thank you very much. Oh, well, so that's been done. But they are enabling the wealth fund to sell Russian stocks if transactions comply with international sanctions. I don't know exactly what that means, and I probably should read this Maidan press article, but I presume that might raise funds. It might, I don't know what effect it will have on Russia, though. Okay. They look like two star-crossed lovers. Zelenskyy and Meloni had a telephone conversation today, I think. Yep, and they spoke about the current situation on the battlefield, discussed the continuation of military support for Ukraine, and agreed to increase the supply of air defense systems to Ukraine. That is the Italian government. Well, we are expecting another aid package from the Italians. So that is going to be welcome for the Ukrainians. Serbia is negotiating with Russia to extend its gas supply contract, which expires in March, according to Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Vulin. He stated that the country is aiming for volumes similar to those outlined in the current agreement with Gazprom. Thanks to strong ties with Moscow, we're in a very good position to discuss economic matters and a gas agreement. As for payments, we will fulfill everything agreed upon with Russia. That's wonderful, Serbia. You wonderful people doing really close work with the Russians there. Well done. The US plays a decisive role in a war in Ukraine, but the situation should change after Trump takes office, according to Viktor Orbán. I discussed this with you earlier in my military aid video. So, quote, without USA, the war would not have happened. This conflict would have ended long ago. Ukraine would not have been able to resist without US participation. Which is, so on the one hand, they're saying, you know, it's all going to change with Trump coming in. And the assumption is for the better. And you can tell that it's for the better because within this sentence here, you've got Viktor Orbán saying that the conflict would have ended long ago and Ukraine wouldn't have been able to resist without US. In other words, this is Orbán saying we think Ukraine should have lost and we hope that they're not going to get continued assistance from the US, and it is all going to change when Trump gets into office. So you know exactly where Viktor Orbán sits here with these kinds of statements, and it is pretty terrible. It's also an indictment on the future American aid to Ukraine. Of course, there's a lot to be worked out with the Trump. I don't know what's going to go on with the Trump administration and Ukraine, and I'm not really sure they know either. I have a sneaky suspicion they are at the moment just being educated. And I mean that like not in an insulting way. Like, I literally think that the Trump administration would not have been privy to intelligence, the requisite intelligence on Ukraine and the Russian war in Ukraine. And as such, would have had these kind of prejudged senses of what was going on. You would have had Donald Trump Jr. and David Sachs and Elon Musk and such people casting their opinions, and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz and Trump as well, actually casting pretty negative opinions about Ukraine. And then winning the election and then going through this lame duck presidency period of Biden, whereby they're actually being educated literally on what's going on. And you've had a silence from Trump. And actually, some of the people around him, Donald Trump Jr. hasn't said much about Ukraine recently, thankfully, because everything he does say is wrong. And I wonder whether they've been told to just, hey, calm it down a little bit. However, Tucker Carlson's still going off and doing what he's doing. But just calm it down a little bit. We're not 100% sure what's going on. We might need to change our approach because actually we are being led to believe that X and Y and Z is the case. And that means that we, as the United States, we as the administration running the United States, might need to change in terms of what we were thinking we should have been doing. Right, staying on Hungary, no more EU money to Orbán and his cronies, as Politico hints at. So this is the idea that, well, actually, we're going to come on to the money bit in a second. We're going to start with Hungarian CIA reportedly spied on EU officials. So officials from the EU anti-fraud office were allegedly followed, wiretapped, and had their laptops hacked by Hungary's intelligence agency. Wow. Okay, so we already have this understanding that Hungary aren't exactly the most popular European nation in the EU. This is going to add grist to the mill for those who want to get Hungary out of the EU, or at least, try and reprimand them more officially for this, for their behaviour. This is not helping. So Hungarian intelligence agencies spying on EU diplomats or EU administration. Now, Hungary is apparently on the brink of losing a €1 billion EU funding, frozen because of the pro-Russian Orbán's rule of law breaches, says Glasnost. It's reported that unless it can carry out 17 measures and gain the European Commission's approval by December the 31st, the €1 billion is gone for good. Okay, this is what I like to see, which is the EU getting harsh on Hungary, because I think Hungary needs to be reprimanded by the EU. I think they need to understand how they should be acting, and that they are not acting in concordance with the EU and in accordance with the values of the EU and the objectives of the EU. Russia on the doorstep as a neighbor, growing in power, military, cyber, information power, is a threat to the EU. And I think Hungary are clearly, as a nation, they are being Russian moles within the EU. But on the other hand, Orbán is now blackmailing the entire EU. So Hungary plans to block the next long-term EU budget if it does not get access to previously blocked funds for its country. The Orbán government's funding has been frozen over concerns about the rule of law and corruption. Quote, Hungary will undoubtedly receive these funds. If we do not get them in 2025 or 2026, then we must get them in 27 or 28. Otherwise, the EU will have no budget, because I will not allow that. I wonder whether we are seeing a growing fracture between the two entities, and that might be what's needed. And this might be a catalyst for Peter Szijjártó. No, he's a foreign minister. Sorry, Peter Magyar, the opposition leader in Hungary, to be able to get popular enough to take over the reins, really. I don't know when the next election is, though. It might be as far away as 2027 or something. So that could be a challenge. But it is, I think, clearly the case that Viktor Orbán is not a very useful leader for the success of the EU. Now, Kyiv Independent reports that the EU fails to approve its 15th sanctions package against Russia, according to Reuters. Now, I'm trying to work out what's happened here. Basically, two nations have voted against it. You would guess Hungary and Slovakia, but it might not be, actually. So this could be something that's just part of the process where people haggle over stuff. It goes back to not the drawing board, but it goes back to be tinkered with, and then it eventually gets passed. So the European Union has failed to approve the 15th sanctions package, which did include an extension for Czechia to import Russian oil products through Slovakia. The EU banned most oil imports from Russia following the full-scale invasion. However, Czechia, Slovakia, and Hungary received exemptions due to their limited access to alternative supplies. 2 EU member states blocked the sanctions package over disagreements, so it could be Slovakia and Hungary, about extending deadlines for European companies to withdraw investments from Russia, Reuters reported. Member states will revisit the sanctions later, according to the news agency. So it's thought that, it could still get through by the end of the year, to be put in place by maybe sort of February the 24th, 2025. Which is quite an important date, in being the 3rd anniversary of the start of the war. So, fingers crossed that is not sunk for good, but it just needs a bit of rejigging. Now, staying on Hungary, because that may well have been Hungary that did that. Here we got Pete saying, a friend in Hungary told me he uses 5 apps daily, 2 games and 3 for photos, videos or music. All are free, but they are packed with ads. Recently, every single ad has started the exact same way. raising questions about political messaging. So here we've got, I think, an advert denigrating Zelenskyy here at the beginning, but he's saying that all the apps are just showing this same sort of advert to start the advertising cycle. So the ad script begins: Zelenskyy at the EU Parliament demanded new sanctions. Sanctions calls price hikes, and Peter Magyar's MEPs stood applauding Zelenskyy wearing the Ukrainian flag. The message is overtly political, delivered during casual app use. The voiceover is unmistakably that of Apathy Bence, or Bence. Apathy is a known propagandist in Hungary. He has a clear public affiliation with the government and often amplifies narratives aligned with Fidesz's political goals. These ads are linked to the Actualis Facebook page, which is tied to Fidesz both ideologically and financially. It targets mostly Peter Magyar and spreads Russian propaganda. Spent 20 million Hungarian florins on Facebook ads alone in 3 months. On other platforms, possibly way higher. These ads highlight how Hungarian taxpayers' money is used to fund coordinated propaganda efforts designed to brainwash Hungarian society. By flooding public spaces with manipulative narratives, the government is reinforcing ignorance and reshaping reality in its favor. Social media is so important, and the advertising that takes place and the manipulation of voices and narratives on social media is such a challenge, and that's what we've seen in Romania. Here we've got just, it seems like basic advertising, but flooding the information spaces and the I guess the IT spaces, if you like, with pro-Fidesz, anti-Ukraine, anti-Magyar advertising. I don't know what there's obviously not very clear rules about that, because I think in the UK we have quite stringent political party advertising rules. You generally don't see any political advertising at all unless there's an election coming up, right? It just doesn't happen. But if it does, all parties have to have the same, I think, advertising space and time. So you wouldn't be able to flood but I don't know about social media actually, because TikTok, say Reform UK, were all over TikTok. And that's interesting. So TV, and this is a problem that we have. I was listening the other day because, I wanted to play you a bit of this video. There's a podcast called The News Agents in the UK, which is really very good, and an excellent section on Elon Musk potentially ploughing in $100 million into Reform UK to Nigel Farage. So his father suggested it, and there's these rumors that he's going to give £100 million to Reform UK. And it doesn't seem like there are laws against that. So there are laws to do in the UK. And sorry, this is very UK centric, but it's interesting here because, what can we learn? What do the UK do well? What do we do badly? So it seems that there are strict laws with giving money to political parties during campaigns, right? So you can only give a maximum, or you can only do this or that or whatever, and foreign money, etc. But outside of the campaign season, it seems like that money just goes away. And also, I think there's a difference between television advertising and spending and whatnot, and possibly social media. And we live in an era now where we are getting our information predominantly from social media and places outside of the mainstream media domain. And there may be some advantages to that, but it's also quite dangerous because there are not publishing rules, right, for Twitter. So Twitter's not responsible for whatever's on Twitter type thing, whereas whatever's on ITV, BBC, Channel 4, whatever, the channels are responsible for them, and so therefore it's carefully regulated. Or not therefore, and it is carefully regulated, whereas the social media spaces are not regulated. So can Elon Musk just come and spank $100 million and in that way influence the UK political outcome? He's gone super right wing, and he's basically gone right wing populist, and he's trying to influence people's elections right around the world. He's been sticking his oar in all these different elections around the world. What does the UK need to do? Is there panicking? Yep, you can bet that there's panic behind the doors of the Houses of Parliament at the moment, where they're trying to work out how to deal with that. And what you do about the richest, most powerful man in the world trying to buy out an election effectively in the UK. And I didn't like Elon Musk much before this week. Turns out I like him even less now. Is that even possible? I don't know. Anyway, the show must go on. Cheers. I will get to some questions in a wee second. Right. So that's enough about Hungary. That's enough of Hungary. Not the Hungarian people. I'm sure that there's some wonderful people in Hungary, and so I've been to Budapest. Lovely. We're going to move to Poland. Not literally. If Russian sabotage and terrorist acts continue, I will close the remaining Russian consular offices in Poland. Sikorski. So I love a bit of Sikorski. The foreign minister, husband of Anne Applebaum. I've almost finished Autocracy Inc. Very good book, I suggest, and a short book. Audiobook is 5 hours long. Really, really well worth getting, although it's a little bit scary. And it really encapsulates. In fact, if you read Autocracy Inc. in the next week or so, you'll probably note that it really chimes with everything I've been saying for the last few weeks. Not because I'm reading it in there, but because actually I'm finding that as I'm reading it, it's reflecting what my views have been about the growth of autocracy and the democratic backsliding we're seeing in the world, and all my worries about the US, all my worries about EU and nations within the EU, all my worries about all sorts of nations around the world. So yeah, I think, you know, if you appreciate what I've been saying on this channel, then you might well appreciate Autocracy Inc. It is a really very good book. Right, okay. So Sikorski here is saying that if Russian sabotage and terrorist acts continue, so the hybrid warfare that we are seeing so much of around Europe, if that continues, then he will close all the Russian consular offices in Poland. That is fantastic. I really think that is strong rhetoric, the sort of rhetoric that we need to hear, and really strong position on Russia and their activities. Right, I'm going to go to, who is this? M Cardful. I think that's who it is. Right, Jonathan, I'm not a particularly patriotic chap. So this is something I should have said the other day. So we've just had the OSCE conference, and it was where Lavrov said his piece, the foreign minister for Russia, and Jan Lipavsky, the Czech foreign minister, stood up and left. You had the Ukrainian foreign minister and team stood up and left. You had another Czech person in the team sitting reading a book. People were not happy, and I reported that, if you remember. That was taking place in Malta, and I forgot to say it was taking place in Malta, and giving a little bit of props. So here are some props. M Cardful says, Jonathan, I'm not particularly patriotic chap, but I wish that you had mentioned that the OSCE conference took place in Malta. I was proud, not because it took place here in Malta, but that our foreign minister, Ian Borg, told the Russians to get out of Ukraine, and he made Malta's position clear. Slava Ukraine. So that's fantastic. And I'm going to say thanks for this. Just talking about you on a live. There you go. Bit of live me answering a comment there. So just to prove I do read your comments. There you go. We're going to move on to things concerning Russia completely, but I'm going to go through some of the comments. Thank you to all of you who are out there listening on this Friday night or Saturday morning or Friday afternoon. Right. Viktor Orbán in the image. What's the betting odds JP has a major rant? Yes. I am a little bit ranty. Thank you, Chris. Okay, Ronnie Franken, awesome to have you here. ATP Geopolitics for an atheist. You do know how to preach. Do not change. Yeah, I do like to get up on my soapbox. I reckon I'd make a pretty fiery pasta. And I don't mean like a nice Italian chili dish. I mean, bad joke. Yes. Thank you. Johnny, good to have your Danish love here. Sorry, had to go to bed. See the stream tomorrow. Love from Langeland. Thanks, Johnny. You take care, my good man. And Benny, hello, JR. So Benny Pie, we've got JR in the background. Benny Pie, who's been working on the shorts and helping out with YouTube in general. Everyone is a legend. Richard Demi, thank you so much for gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Richard, if that's your beard, I am so jealous. Thank you for your kindness, my good man. And Aussie T, good morning, team. JP just came from Andrew Perpetua. Oh, has he got one out at the moment? I'll go have to check that out later. That's my Friday night entertainment. And just finally, before I go on, Pantalones Grandes, the idea Russia is winning anything is ridiculous. It only exists as a propaganda narrative. Double down on Ukraine support and Russia is finished. I really get the sense that this is actually the case, guys. So, right, let's as we're in chat mode, right? Before I continue on the next bit, the geopolitics news. I said this the other day, yesterday, that, and this is not trying to give Biden props because I think it's accidental, but I think the Biden drip feeding of aid, and I know some people said it was on purpose, and there are these theories that it was, like Lloyd Austin said something back in, I think, April 2022, that we need to defeat Russia so fundamentally that they can't do this again for another generation, or something like that, that made you think, or maybe there was an objective to make this a long protracted war that would fundamentally degrade Russia in a way that a short war couldn't. So if you supplied Ukraine with everything all at once, and they had the ability to shoot really deep, and Russia kind of capitulated quite quickly, and they didn't have time to turn into a war economy and whatnot, then you would have had a defeated Russia that could have come back quite easily for a second bite of the apple. The fact that this has been a long and protracted war, not because I don't think it's because Biden wanted it to be, but I think he and some of his advisors, like Jake Sullivan, were just too afraid. It was anti-escalation to the point where they ended up drip feeding, and then there was a 7-month impasse in Congress due to Trump and the Republicans, and so you had this situation where the war has lasted an awful lot longer than it needed to, and is continuing. But with that, the Russians have been degraded in a way that wouldn't have happened otherwise, like fundamentally, economically, politically, actually, demographically, militarily, in terms of equipment and personnel, and thus demographically. And these people running away, brain drains, as people have escaped Russia because they didn't want to be mobilized, so on and so forth. This has been a fundamental kneecapping of Russia. Now, that has come at a cost, though. So before, we go, oh, that's brilliant, that's fantastic, therefore Biden accidentally did the right thing, or whatever. There is a cost to that, and the cost is the costs are Ukrainian lives, Ukrainian society, Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian history, Ukrainian economy, Ukrainian resilience, and the brain drain that they've lost in people leaving their own country. So this degradation of Russia has been paid for by a degradation of Ukraine. But if you're only interested in degrading Russia, then actually this long protracted war has probably done a much better job of that. And so this is all leading up to this point now, which is, I think Russia are at this kind of precipice. I don't know whether they're right on the edge, whether they're 10 meters away, 20 meters away, but that precipice is there. And it's an economic precipice before it's also a demographic precipice, which they were struggling with demography anyway, with not having a high enough birth rate. And then you have people dying, people running away, etc., and you have real issues. And that then has an economic impact as well. Inflation, ruble tanking, becoming a vassal state of China, so on and so forth. All of these things put Russia near or on a precipice. And then militarily, I think they're on a precipice as well. And again, on the edge, 5 meters, 10 meters, 20 meters, who knows? But they're approaching a precipice at the very least. And that we can see in all the stuff I show you in the first video I do every single day. These are the losses. This is a change of behavior. The convicts and mercenaries from abroad, and more convicts, and not training people, and poorly equipped, and not having the equipment, and using golf buggies and motorcycles, etc., etc. Okay, they are on an equipment and a personnel precipice, i.e. a military precipice. This is the time so all of this basically was coming from Pantalones Grandes. This is the time to double down on Ukraine support, and if we do, Russia is finished. I fully believe that. And this is what worries me the most about a Trump administration, that they could do that, and they might do that. I'm not saying they won't do that, because I just don't know with Trump. I think he's so unpredictable. but it won't be coming from Trump's grasp of morality or politics. It will come from being convinced that it's either in his best interest, literally personally, like narcissistically, or some such other reason that isn't his long-term political nous and understanding of how the world works. I don't think he has that. I think he's deeply ignorant. But he may make the right decision just accidentally, a bit like kind of Biden, if you believe that that course of events was the right course of events to the cost of many Ukrainian lives. So you could get this situation where it all happens, whereby America and the rest of the world are responsible for the absolute destruction of Russia as we knew it, or Trump comes in and takes a foot off the pedal, lifts the sanctions, and then we were so close and yet so far. You know, take the foot off the neck of the Russian economy, and they are able to bounce back. We are at that point, and we should be doubling down. Absolutely should be doubling down. I hope that makes sense to you. That's just my opinion. Take it for what it is. Thank you for joining. Elon, JR. Hungary was already an information black hole, with everything shared with them inevitably ending up in the Kremlin. Yeah, absolutely. And we've heard over the course of this war that Hungary, you know, and Slovakia, NATO have stopped sort of sharing information so widely with them as NATO co-members. As NATO members, other NATO nations have stopped sharing information so freely with them, and yeah, it is. Yeah, that is Hungary for you. Oops, I blurred. Last one before we go on. Thanks, Christopher Staub. If Trump is good at anything, he is very good at sensing weakness. Perhaps he senses this in Putin. It's a really good point, actually. I've said this before, but my hope for Trump is that the more people take the piss out of him for being a lackey of Putin, the more he'll go, screw you, I'm not a lackey of Putin. And actually that, because he's very thin-skinned. Like Trump is, you know, people, this term snowflake has been around for so long, and it's supposed to be aimed at the liberals. But it's so funny that I find that the people at the other end of the spectrum are the ones with the thinnest skins and the most snowflakey. And I think he is a bit of a snowflake in terms of, and he's admitted that. He said that in a rally back in on the campaign trail. He literally said explicitly, and I do paraphrase, but he explicitly said, I don't like it when people criticize me. I much prefer it when people say nice things about me. And that's absolutely true. He hates it when people criticize him, and he takes it really badly, and he goes on a rant on Truth Social rather than take it on the chin and go, yeah, whatever, I'm bigger than that. He's not like that. He's not bigger than that, and it affects him hugely. So that's a sense of self-esteem, or I don't know, sense of narcissism, or whatever it is. He really takes that to heart, and I think if you can use that to get him to react against Putin by saying that he is like sitting on Putin's lap. If you can take the piss out of Trump and say, oh, cuddling up to old Poots, are you now? Oh, that's nice. Sitting on, oh, you little Putin lapdog, are you, Trump? That will make Trump go nuts. And then actually he'll react against Putin maybe in a stronger way. Yeah. Okay. Right. Now we are going to continue. We're going to go on to Russia here. So with you. Oh, no, that's supposed to be in the next one. That's in Georgia. Sorry about that. I'm going to keep that for later. Anyway, let's go back to Russia. So all of these are in the wrong place. Some of them are in the wrong place. Okay. Russian propagandist Kots has admitted that aside from airstrikes, Russia cannot offer any substantial assistance to Assad's regime, making it impossible to halt rapid advances of the opposition. So we have, just to let you know, you may or may not know, but the rebel forces have made lightning advances pretty much through a city called Hama. So they took Aleppo, taken a city further to the south called Hama. And then they are now presently, as we speak, on the outskirts of Homs, which is an incredibly important city. It's played a big role in the war already. And its next step, Damascus, and you think in Tartus, and Russia have got this choice as to whether they stick it out there or whether they cut their losses. Now, Russian propagandist Kots admits that aside from airstrikes, Russia can't really offer any substantial assistance to Assad's regime. The whole strategy in Syria was Russia did everything by air, pretty much. Really, their role was bombing the crap out of places, so in order to support the Assad regime on the ground, give or take, and that's all they can do. And so, with such a rapid movement of the rebels, it becomes very hard to bomb the crap out of static buildings and stuff. They're just moving, and actually is far more difficult, and it makes them all the more vulnerable, especially with all the captured air defense units and whatnot. So yeah, it's impossible to halt the rapid advance of the opposition. I absolutely agree with that. And then the rebels have reached close to enough to apparently have provoked the evacuation of the Russian flotilla from Tartus. I've talked about this. That's according to Maritime Executive. On December the 2nd, a Western official told me today that they don't think Russia has abandoned Tartus yet, despite the movement of ships. And in fact, there are claims that they're moving a lot of equipment. So there's S-400s have been seen moving to Tartus. The Russian embassy in Damascus has advised all Russian nationals who remain in Syria to immediately depart the country while commercial flights are still available. That tells you pretty much all you need to know about what Russia is going to do. So Russia, and next it says, and its strategic allies, Russia has informed Damascus that any intervention to help Assad would be limited and that it has other priorities at this time, Sky News Arabia reported, citing its sources. And then breaking news from Hassan Ibrahim, officially confirmed Bashar al-Assad left Syria with his family, apparently in Moscow, had been for some days, but more official there. Assad's chief propagandist, Shadi Helwa, was spotted on a Fly Dubai flight to Dubai. He fled the country. So the writing is on the wall, isn't it? And then finally, it seems very unlikely at this point, given regime forces are melting away and an Iranian intervention is not forthcoming, that, and this is a claim from John Lechner, from my Russian sources, if Iran doesn't work to save Assad, then Russia will not either. Same sources believe there are no plans right now to send Africa Corps or another private military company. So Michael Kaufman says, yeah, highly unlikely. Best guess is the Russian forces will focus on cutting some kind of deal to keep its two main bases, which are key to operations. Whether they can, I mean, if the rebels take the whole of the country, then yeah, Russia are going to be in a lot of trouble because they are not going to have the ability to land their cargo planes there on the way to Russia, and they're not going to have the ability to sort out their naval fleet in the port of Tartus on the Mediterranean. So it's incredibly important what happens in Syria. However, the flip side is, and someone definitely said this in my comments. I was reading it earlier. And this is kind of what I was saying in my last video, which is, on the one hand, it's really great to see Russia losing influence in Syria, losing a bunch of equipment. And the more equipment they lose there, the better, by the way. In fact, we want them to lose 100% of the equipment, because the flip side is that Syria is costing them a lot of money, and it's costing them a lot of resources in terms of equipment and personnel. Equipment, personnel, money. All of that equipment, personnel, money, if it's not in Syria, it can go to Ukraine. So there is a downside to what is going on at the moment. What you'd really want is the war to be a bit more difficult for Russia, so they're actually plowing in those resources to fighting in Syria. If they're just going to pull out, then that allows them to move all of those things possibly to Ukraine. That then becomes a little bit of a challenge. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. That's at least my speculation. Remember, everything I say is just, I'm some random dude sitting on the internet on the south coast of England. So take it for what it is. I occasionally have too much wine to drink, and then I don't know what I'm talking about. Or you could say it's genius and it's exactly what you expect from the legend of the multiverse. Take your choice. Take your pick. Right, we're going to go on to Georgia. What are you talking about? We're going to go on to Georgia. Marika Mikiashvili, who I've tried to contact on Blue Sky to say, do you fancy an interview? I'd love to find out about what's going on in Georgia. So if you can help me get her to appear on the channel, that'd be fantastic. So what's going on in Georgia? So with Ukraine sanctioning, so Ukraine have sanctioned Georgian Dream. I did mention this first thing this morning. The Tbilisi mayor Kaka Kaladze has lost his 2 apartments in Kiev. So that's good. And I'd hope that maybe that could be given to some internally displaced people from Mariupol or something. Right, Bucharest. This is Bucharest. That's not Georgia. Interesting though that is Bucharest. So people have been out in Romania before they annulled the. I had this ready because I think this is from last night. So this is before they annulled the elections, but there was this groundswell of anti-Georgescu sentiment in Romania, and that was really good to see. Anyway, moving back to Georgia. So again, Mikiashvili says activists broke into the public service hall today, the main agency that's responsible for issuing all sorts of documents to citizens, and demanded the agency go on strike. What you want is basically the government to shut down. So this is exactly the right sort of thing. Go and pressure people because we want democracy to take place freely and fairly, and that hasn't happened. The elections were rigged, and so you need to play a bit harsh with, a peaceful protest isn't good enough to just sit there and do nothing. I remember when I was at uni at Leeds University, 1996 to 2000. Good times, 90s, beautiful decade, great music, good times. And at the time when I went to university, we didn't pay for university fees. Tuition was free, right? And they started to introduce it, or they were going to introduce it in the government was at the time. And I went on strike as a student. We went and we protested around Leeds, and we occupied the Leeds City Council building. We went to the top floor, and then all the police got involved, and we got kicked out. And I was on the front page of the Leeds student newspaper. There you go. But because just going out with a placard and standing on a street, I mean, that didn't work. It didn't do anything, right? The government didn't change because a bunch of students in Leeds, and even though it's happening around the country, it didn't change. And now people have to pay £9,000 a year. But at the time, it's like I feel I have to do something, and just doing things completely peacefully. And even though that was peaceful, we were peaceful. We just occupied a building. But it's like the Georgians need to be able to properly disrupt Georgia such that the country fails to be able to function properly, and the government is forced to do something about that. Now, it can go either way. They either crack down even harder and even harder and even harder, and it becomes a brutal regime where democracy is snuffed out by internal security services being as brutal as possible, or people in the security services start defecting, or all government employees start saying, yeah, this is good and right. And you get a tipping point that's reached whereby Georgia opts for the right decision. So again, Mikiashvili says there are reports that the head of the department responsible for dispersals resigned together with his 4 deputies, and so did the police psychological preparation staff, around 12 people. In general, there are reports of dissent within the police. Now, this is exactly what I was talking about. First cracks before collapsing. They cannot follow your movement on long periods of time. So strong, we stand with you. Absolutely. So it has to be about, standing strong as long as possible. Now, again, she says here, like, people are finding the names of their family members and relatives in the lists of violent policemen and publicly lashing out at them. So this is a bit of a grainy picture of policemen checking their phones. Matavari channel has leaked a list of riot police officers involved in a violent crackdown on pro-EU protesters. This is them checking to see if their names are on the list, as pictures and names continue to be published. That's interesting. And what you want is these people to be known and then pressure put on them. And yeah, ordinarily you wouldn't advocate for doxing and stuff like that. But in a time when there's an existential threat to the country, you need to be pulling on all the ways that you can affect change without resorting to too much violence, right? Here, Tim White says people are on the streets on day 8 of the Georgia protests, increasingly angry at the arrest and beatings of high-profile figures. Actor Andro Chianadze, comedian Onis Chikadadze, and more have been reportedly arrested. Politician Aleko Elisashvili is in hospital after his arrest. Meanwhile, violence has flared in Kutaisi, so it's another Georgian town, one of a number of towns and cities around Georgia which are rising up again. Local reporters say 2 people were beaten and arrested. And that's going on in a number of places around Georgia. Bad week for Putin, says Jane Kiev, as Russia's puppet Assad regime in Syria is likely to soon fall, and protests against the Russian-backed government in Georgia are growing daily. As all this while, war rages on in Ukraine, and Russia's domestic economy is in a state of freefall. And this is Tbilisi now, he said yesterday, though. So big crowds yesterday. Now, I'm wondering how it's going today. It's reported that a Ukraine national is among those arrested in the Georgia protests. It was broadly a quiet night in Tbilisi and cold. Most of Rustaveli let fires at some point to keep warm. And this is from last night. Oh, no, that's him reporting that tonight. I don't know if he's talking about tonight. I have a sense there are fewer people on the streets tonight from the video I've seen. More and more Georgia's society are standing up to the Russia-inspired tyranny. Over 100 musicians have withdrawn from state events. And this is the kind of activity that needs to happen. And clergy have demanded an end to the beatings. Some politicians have switched sides, yes. And protesters tried to tempt police here with waffles. You got to try everything. Yeah, this is how one of the opposition leaders, Elisashvili, that we just heard about, was taken into the detention center. Healthy walking. So here the video, he's healthy and walking, but he's now hospitalized, heavily beaten, and with most likely a broken rib. Detention car beatings and now prison beatings. In other words, there have been crimes taking place by the internal security services. Here, there's visual evidence, video evidence that the guy that's been arrested is in good health, and now he's essentially knackered because he's been beaten up by the police. Now, I worry that the government are going to put things in place to stop people being able to protest, which is what's to be expected, but it will put a dampener on the protests. Citizens are not allowed to use the metro. This is how Bidzina Ivanishvili is trying to contain the anger of the people. The Russian nightmare has created a totalitarian dystopia in Georgia, and our Western friends are limited to statements. And Tim White says of tonight, not too many developments. And I do think there's a fewer people there. I mean, it's still sizable crowds. But that's the scene in Tbilisi. Some arrests, chases through metro stations, but Georgia protests do continue, just slightly more dispersed there. But here in Batumi, it's looking pretty good. Quite a few people there as the Georgia protests are still going on nationwide. Anyway, so that's Georgia. Let's hope that they continue in the same vein. Let's go now to you, Total Legends, in the live chat. Okay, let's bring that over to in front of me so you don't see the side of my face too much, because who wants to see that, or the front even. Right, Tremors, I read out one of your comments yesterday, Tremors. Hope that's all right. Imagine Orbán and Carlson if Trump gets info from the Pentagon and the CIA and does a 180 on aid to Ukraine and gives them more. It would give them all aneurysms. I said this the other day, mate, and thank you for your super chat. Really appreciate that. Thanks for your Australian love. I said this the other day, exactly this. The cognitive dissonance reduction would just cause an aneurysm, like you say. And I'd love it. I'm there for it. And I am eating popcorn all the time that's happening. I want to see Tucker Carlson's brain implode because Trump goes all in on supporting Ukraine. And I want to see Elon Musk shut the F up. And I want to see David Sachs just get sucked into an information black hole and never to return. I dream of all these things. Is it likely to happen? No. Could it happen? Yes. Let's hope it happens. King Raccoon, can we please do another fundraiser for NATO? I will put in the first 150. That's very kind. Now, King Raccoon, we are just about to embark on a fundraiser. I've kept this quiet because I don't really know much about it. But I'm on a WhatsApp group with Suchamimus, Operator Starsky, the Shields, Jonathan Fink from Silicon Curtain, Rick the Ukrainian, and more. Loads of us. And the idea is that I think each of us are going to raise like 10,000, I presume, euros each, right? And then it all goes together to one big into one big fundraiser, and it is for vehicles. I'm only at the moment sort of umming and ahhing because I don't know the details enough. I've signed up to it, if you like, but it's just in the very early stages. It's not NATO, but it is really similar to NATO, and it will be trucks, and there'll be things like badges and stuff for people who donate enough. And there is like the Christmas tree. So I think it's going to be hopefully done over the Christmas period. But yeah, so it is Car for Ukraine is what it's called. And it's the OG in Ukraine vehicle provider, all engineering skills in Ukraine. Much of the donor dollar remains in Ukraine. Car for Ukraine almost exclusively buys vehicles in the UK, though, where vehicles are cheaper than the EU due to having the smaller right-hand drive car market. We have a Ukrainian buyer living in London. We receive many vehicles donated outright. We place metal armor on the vehicles and all the vital points for human and vehicle survival. We have partnered with the Ukrainian MLRS installation engineers to deliver a new improved guided system for greater directional targeting. We're keen to get to know your community, blah, 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 campaign information, etc., etc. So that is Car for Ukraine. And that is something that we're going to be doing, I presume, imminently. Sorry, I've been a bit quiet on that. There have been some options with regard to fundraising, but that is what's going on. I need to get in touch with JR, actually, remind me. With NATO to see how that's going, because I presume the vehicles are going out this month, and so it'd be really nice to keep an eye on that. I just want to say a massive thanks to Dave Davis, who is always so generous. Thank you, Dave. Really appreciate your support all the way from Canada. Big love to you. And Ross Phillips, who I met in Kiev. Ross, how are you, my good man? We had a beer. I've got a picture of us having a beer together. It was great. Let's do it again sometime, mate. So he was, at the time, I presume he still is, teaching out in Kiev. More European MPs are starting to say more boldish statements regarding Russia lately. Happy to see this, and I hope it's all heading somewhere. Ross, interesting. I don't know that I've seen that. They're the same ones saying the same sort of things, like Gabriel Landsbergis, although he's no longer foreign minister for Lithuania. But there are lots of strong statements. I don't know if it's more than there were previously. I hope that's right, though. And that would be really good. I think we need to just be much bolder. I think, actually, you could be right. So people like David Lammy the other day, I played you that video, the foreign minister for the UK. He was absolutely on point and very, very explicit about Russia being behind everything and being the bad guys. We just need to continue with that, but we also need to be fighting in the information spaces. Europe as a whole, like the EU and UK and Norway and Switzerland and whoever, we need to be having some very joined up thinking with regard to social media and disinformation. I think we've been caught with our pants down. Romania is a great example of this. If we don't have something worked out pretty flipping soon, we're doing a disservice to our electorates, to our population, to our citizens. People love to believe crazy things and iconoclastic things that are anti-establishment. We're like that, humans. I was speaking to someone today, had a chat to someone that's just been visiting, actually, that Helen's daughter's living here, who knows. And right, I'm an atheistic philosopher, right? So I talk about probability analyses. I debunk over the time, like Mitch, who's here. Hey, Mitch. He knows me from thanks, topping off the ramp fuel. I'm just getting going, mate. So he's been with me through my other channel, A Tippling Philosopher, right? And the stuff I do all day, every day, has traditionally been like debunking conspiracy theory claims and this claim and religions and all sorts of stuff, right? And so your man was saying, like, what do you think of this conspiracy? He went through 9/11, all of them basically, and he believed them all. And I was telling him, I was breaking them down and talking about the way our psychology works, and I was referring to a conspiracy theorist, a PhD student, well, as was, he's now just works in the field of conspiracy theories, Rob Brotherton. I remember he gave a talk in Portsmouth, Scepticism in a pub, and he was talking about, like, generally, statistically speaking, you believe one conspiracy theory, you believe them all. And we have this tendency to go, and this is kind of like, I'm sorry to go off on one here, but we have this tendency to go, I don't understand this, therefore that. It works with religion. And I'm going back thousands of years, but I don't understand how lightning works. What the hell is going on there? Therefore, Thor is angry, right? Attribution. We can attribute explanation to phenomena that otherwise we would not be able to. But humans are not very good at saying, I don't know. And so we should be saying, I don't know. But we don't. We say, I don't understand this, therefore that. And that then works very much. That kind of God thinking works with conspiracy theories, which is and aliens. I don't understand how we've got this technology, therefore aliens. No, let's sit down and think about this. I don't understand how the pyramids were built, therefore aliens. I don't understand this, therefore there's some weird anomaly with the way those buildings fell down in 9/11, therefore conspiracy theory. And it's just like you are going to the least probable explanation of the data, and that is a bad thing to try and do. You should, if you want justification of the least probable thing before we look at the data, then the data needs to be exceptionally good to support that. Otherwise, you are believing things are the least probable explanation. Anyway, built in with all that is the excitement of believing the anti-establishment ideas, like conspiracy theory thinking is kind of like exciting. I remember I've got a book still over there. I think I bought it when I was like 18. It was like the X-Files Book of the Unexplained. And I've got, Graham Hancock's Fingerprints of the Gods. And it's all kind of exciting until you kind of learn that actually it's all bullshit. And there are many better explanations for that. But I think we have a tendency to really like to believe things that go against the mainstream, right? Humans love a bit of that. I'm not going to be sheeple, and actually that finds its way into political thinking as well. And so, I have changed my views on, say, NATO and the reality of geopolitics precisely because I've got into it and understood it better. But previously, I was like, oh, this is American imperialism, which does exist, by the way. But like trying to explain everything in terms of like the conspiracy of NATO getting together in these smoky rooms and making these decisions, and Russia doing this, rather than actually understanding that, do you know what, Ukraine and Ukrainians have agency. And people getting out in the Maidan protests were young students wanting a better future for themselves. And actually, that's a really good explanation of why Maidan happened. It's not Victoria Nuland that decided that. And it's not fucking Jim Brennan and John McCain. Like, they didn't get those millions out there. They went and spoke to them, but they didn't get them out there. That was an organic movement of people really peed off with the corruption and the oligarchy and the Russian influence on their political discourse and mechanisms and processes. And anyway, I've forgotten even where this conversation started. But the idea is, we need to be very wary that when certain theories and certain ideas are very attractive because they're anti-establishment, and it's kind of the John Mearsheimer, Jeffrey Sachs approach to, it's this happened because of that, and it's all NATO's fault, and these people are doing these kind of deals, and it's like, well, causality is very complex, and these things happen for a whole bunch of reasons. But at the end of the day, the simplest explanation here is that Russia invaded another sovereign democratic nation, and that sucks, and we need to hold them to account for doing so. And I just hope that we do. So that was it. It's about disinformation, is it? We need to make sure that this disinformation is shut down, because some of these things that we read on the internet might be attractive because they're a little bit saucy, a little bit anti-establishment, iconoclastic, but they're wrong, and they lead to people dying on the battlefields in Ukraine. And disinformation is dangerous, and we need to do something very seriously about it. Anyway, that wasn't really a rant, but it's over now. I'm moving on to the United States. Let's get ready for a rant. My throat is hurting, I can tell you. It's only one thing to help there, and that is Georgian wine. Thank you, Georgia. Right. Zelenskyy may meet Trump tomorrow in Paris at the opening of Notre Dame Cathedral. Zelenskyy is expected to arrive in Paris. The renovated Notre Dame Cathedral will open on December the 7th after a 5-year restoration that began as a result of that huge fire that took place in 2019. Well, Trump's going to be there. Zelensky's going to be there. There's lots of talk. I caught the news a little bit earlier where they're expecting them to meet. I hope they do, and I hope that it is fruitful. Now, take this with a pinch of salt, anecdote, etc., etc. Professor Peter R. Aranella, I have no idea who this person is. Let's have a look. UCLA criminal law professor, former TV legal analyst on ABC News, etc., etc. Okay, I just got off the phone with a lifelong British friend who works for their intelligence service. The Brits and the Israelis both believe um, Trump is doing Putin's bidding, as his absurd cabinet appointments are all hostile to the agencies they might be heading. My friend concluded our conversation with a dire warning. Western European countries are now assuming that they can no longer rely on the US if any foreign intervention into their countries occur. In essence, he was saying NATO will be their only protector as Trump confirms a new isolationist foreign policy. He fears that Trump will broker a ceasefire in the Ukraine by withdrawing all US support unless Ukraine agrees to Putin's terms. Of course, the vast majority of Americans know very little or nothing about the dramatic changes in our foreign policy that are about to occur. Now, pinch of salt, but there's definitely this fear in Europe that America is just about to take a very bad turn away from their present trajectory, which is much more globalist, much more at the head of NATO, at the head of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, trying to organize things. Biden, for all of the criticisms we can level at Biden for how he has aided or already not assisted Ukraine as much as we would have liked. One thing he did do very well, particularly at the beginning of the war, is marshal an allied, an allied cooperative around defending Ukraine. And he did that very, very well and very quickly. And we kind of forget that now. We talked about it quite a bit at the beginning of the war. I was certainly talking about that, how actually Biden did a really good job there. And we must remember that. But it could be that now Trump is going to take a bit of a different tack, and that would be super, super unfortunate. I'm just going to put myself on mute to just say something to my son. And there you go. That's parenting 101. Right. Oh, my partner's back. Okay, moving on. These are the numbers. Trump nominee buried on MSNBC for his financial mismanagement. This is a raw story. Okay, why am I talking about this? Because Pete Hegseth is the nominee for the Department of Defense. It's a huge job, 3 million employees, and what is it? A budget of $900 billion, right? That's a huge budget, and he's pretty anti-Ukraine. Don't want him as a head of DoD. Personally, myself, and on behalf of Ukraine. Now, he's already got loads of sexual misconduct swords hanging over his head, sort of Damocles, if you like, hanging over his head. But he also has been in trouble for. So here's a guy that's supposed to be managing a $900 billion budget, and the two vets organizations that he ran previously, these small organizations, he put into debt. And so I'm just thinking, is this really the right guy for the job? So these are the numbers the New York Times brought up today. They had an 8.7 million budget in 2008. 4 years later, by 2012, it was in debt. As the New York Times said, quote, it fizzled out. He then was at Concerned Vets for America, who the Times said was at the time continually spending more money than it took in. And then the last year he was there, it was in $37 in debt. And that's where these two small vets organizations, and then on top of that, forget the financial mismanagement. On top of that, you have the New Yorker piece that talks about the whistleblower complaints of his activities while he was there. And then you got sexual misconduct, public drunkenness, and financial mismanagement. And these, those are his skills. So is he the right person for the job? I don't think so. Possibly more likely to be Ron DeSantis, who replaces him. Julia Davis from Russian Media Monitor and Daily Beast says, while Tucker Carlson is positioning himself as a dove of peace, toiling to prevent a nuclear war, Putin's acolytes say he is also acting as a carrier pigeon for the Trump president and privately delivering his messages to Trump. So Putin's friends say that Tucker Carlson is acting as a secret back channel to Trump. I don't know where to start on that, but I'll just leave that there. Now, Tulsi Gabbard, who is in for the Director of National Intelligence, and who a lot of people are saying is the biggest worry of all the picks. Now, quote, 3 former aides said Gabbard regularly read and shared articles from the Russian news site RT, formerly known as Russia Today, which the US intelligence community has characterized in 2017, so before she was using it, as the Kremlin's principal international propaganda outlet. So the person in charge, hopefully, according to Trump, in charge of national intelligence, is someone who likes to read Russian propaganda and get sucked in by it. Ex-Tulsi Gabbard aides say she was a devout consumer of Kremlin propaganda network RT. They say Gabbard continued regularly reading and sharing articles from RT well after she was advised that it was an unreliable source of information. Now, nearly 100 former senior US diplomats, intelligence officials, and national security experts who served in both Democratic and Republican administrations, bipartisan here, so don't have a go at me for being pro-Democrat or whatever, this is both sides, are urging Senate leaders to hold closed-door hearings to thoroughly review government files on Tulsi Gabbard. In a letter to Senators Chuck Schumer and John Thune, the leaders of both Senate's teams, said they were alarmed by the choice of Gabbard to oversee all 18 US intelligence agencies. That's your one in charge of all 18 intelligence agencies. Excellent. Good choice. They said her past actions, quote, call into question her ability to deliver unbiased intelligence briefings to the president, Congress, and to the entire national security apparatus. Goodness me. It's all rather depressing. Right. We're almost there, guys. Ukrainian group in US opposes Starlink expansion due to Musk's Russia ties. Okay, interesting news about Starlink, actually, or the Star Shield, which is the bit that he had to kind of offload the DoD. They've extended a contract for Ukrainian use of Starlink in Ukraine. I'm going to report that in my military aid tomorrow. But here it's slightly different. So the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America, UCCA, so these are Ukrainians in American politics, cited concerns over Musk's contacts with Russia and the alleged use of his Starlink system by Russian forces in Ukraine. And he is, well, you know, he's right in the middle of the White House now. And, oh, look, let's see big contracts go out to his companies. Who knew? Now, this is the man that I arguably most dislike over their comments. Like, Tucker Carlson takes a close second to this guy. Thing that Tucker Carlson annoys me more about Tucker Carlson is he's got a bigger platform than David Sachs. But Elon Musk always retweets David Sachs. And David Sachs is one of the tech bros, South African. You've got Peter Thiel, David Sachs, and Elon Musk. All of these seemingly pro-apartheid South African tech bros forming a broligarchy. So we already know that Elon Musk is at the heart of the government. I think it's Peter Thiel something as well. And now David Sachs is going to be appointed. So Donald Trump appointed venture capitalist and fierce critic of Ukraine, David Sachs, to serve as a White House AI and crypto czar and lead the Presidential Council of Advisors for Science and Technology. He is massively anti-Ukraine. He says the worst stuff on Ukraine out of all the people saying horrible things on Ukraine. I detest what this guy says. I think I detest him. And actually, I'm looking at his face now. Yeah, I detest him. Definitely. Jay and Kiev says, why is Putin, just what I was saying, pushing all these South African crypto bros to run the US government? Because our key to American power is the US dollar as the world's reserve currency, and Russia's primary goal is to undermine that. Musk, Thiel, and Sachs will mainstream crypto, then blow it up. So this is in response to Sachs being chosen for that position. Yeah, I don't know. Christine King says, not a Trump fan, but he's a US dollar money man. Realizing how crypto is controlled, there's no way he'll agree to use crypto as a reserve currency, even if they offer him dollars. The South African bros are in for a big surprise. Now, this is where it gets a little bit interesting. When you saw the campaign, one thing that Trump did well, he did a number of things really well. He knew his audience, and he went on shows that he could that played to that audience. So he went on the right-wing blog channels in the blogosphere, and he did all of that. He knew his audience, and he went to the crypto conference, one that Kamala Harris didn't go to, and he spoke there, and he was seen as very pro-crypto. But actually, when you listen to Trump's views on crypto, and he admitted it at the conference pretty much, he said, hey, we're just going to he said something like, we're just going to use crypto to just write off $35 trillion debt. or something. He's just making up like absolute nonsense. But he said something like, "Oh, you guys know more about this. I don't really know." I'm paraphrasing again, but he basically admitted he doesn't really know about crypto. And then when you listen to him talk about crypto, when he's asked explicitly at these kind of conferences about crypto, he like bumbles around and knows as little as I do about crypto. I know nothing about crypto. I don't understand crypto, how it works, but I wouldn't even pretend to. If I got up at a conference, I'd be like, I honestly don't know what I'm doing talking here. I know nothing about this, but if you guys think it's a good idea, actually, no, not necessarily. If you guys think that's probably the worst people I should be asking. But anyway, point being that Trump is very pro crypto, but he doesn't understand crypto. And actually, that point's an interesting one where you've got some big crypto guys right in the middle of his entire organization, if you like. But actually, he is a US dollar man, and that's what he understands. So I don't know how far they'll get with that, all that crypto stuff, without wanting to sound too much like a pretty ignorant Trump there, all that crypto stuff. Right. Anyway, we're going to round this off with some comments and some thank yous to you guys. Kid Rock, thank you so much. Kid Rock 966 for your super sticker. Really appreciate that, my good man. Thank you. Johnny Nedregard, some Norwegian love there. Hello, community. Slava Ukraini. And it is a lovely community. And I really, really appreciate you, as I do Mitch Mazarol, who is the Canadian legend. Topping off the rant fuel. Thank you for your Canadian support there, my friend. I actually had time to do a couple of videos on my other channel. So if you want to check out A Tippling Philosopher, amazingly, I have another channel where I occasionally put content because I've got that much spare time in the day. But I really enjoyed doing a couple of videos this week, and I need to also spend some time philosophizing about stuff because I don't give that channel enough love. So yeah, Mitch, thanks for that, and hopefully I gave enough there to get you over the next week. And I'll have to do that some more. King Raccoon, hi JP, can we please? Yeah. So you said that earlier. Thank you very much, by the way, King Raccoon. That's really generous of you. And I've been trying to contact you, but for some reason it won't let me contact you on. I know you've messaged me elsewise, but on the Facebook business page is what they call it now for groups. When you have a page, they call it goes through some business thing or whatever. Anyway, so yes, that is happening. As I mentioned earlier, it won't be a NATO one, but it'd be Car for Ukraine, which is a fairly similar thing. But thank you, King Raccoon, really kind. Now, Robert McKay, hey mate, JP, you comment about the two-sidism of the media and a lack of coverage of Ukraine. You, of course, are correct with one exception. BBC World Service is great. Yes, it does a business other outlets ignore. Right. People might not. So in the UK, you get people who are really anti-BBC because it's seen as like part of the government, big government, and it's woke and this and that. And I keep trying to explain to people that politically, the BBC as an organisation, as a news organisation, is vacuous. Its actual politics programming, or at least its news reporting on politics, is completely devoid of political opinion, almost always. And it will have things like Question Time, which is the flagship political program. But Nigel Farage has just been on there for the 38th time, the record-breaking 38th time. And what they do is they actually try and appease the far right because the right, the Tories and Reform, because they know that they're the ones more likely to defund them because it's a public service broadcaster. Whereas the left, it's kind of cherished, and so the left aren't going to harangue them, and so they can skew to the right, and they do that by appointing political editors who are on the right. So all of their political editors for the last however many years have been on the right. The last left-wing political guy was James O'Brien on Newsnight as one of their part-time presenters, and they got rid of him for being too left-wing, right? So but people on the right don't realize that. So they attack the BBC for being left-wing because they have black people and gay people on programs and say, look, they're so woke, therefore they're left-wing. That's the difference between programming, the social cultural programming, where they have a charter where they have to be representative and they have to do things as according to the charter. And they have their political programming, which is generally vacuous because they can't be political. You go and watch MSNBC and you watch Fox News in the US, and it's 50% news, but 50% political propaganda, where Fox News would be openly saying we. They talk about we, and what they mean is the Republican Party. We want this to happen. Like, you would never get on the BBC. So people don't understand the BBC, right? So that's my pet peeve, and you've heard me say that before. But there's another arm to the BBC which is woefully underappreciated, and it's a BBC World Service. I've talked to you about the job that BBC Russia is doing with Mediadzona in counting up the dead in the conflict in Ukraine, right? That is BBC World Service, like the part of what they're doing. They have BBC News in like Urdu, in Russian, in Swahili, and all these languages around the world. Because in all honesty, the BBC World Service is a propaganda arm for the UK government. But propaganda is a bit pejorative. What it does is it spreads decent English language news and knowledge around the world through its long wave radio, so you can get people in the middle of Africa listening to BBC World Service. It's been a part of people's lives right throughout the world for many a decade, in a really important way. So we often refer to Radio Free Europe, which is an American funded European kind of, I think its basis was in kind of Cold War times. RFE and RFL, Radio Free Liberty, that is kind of sort of what the Americans are doing in that part of the world with their kind of media, kind of international media arm, if you like. But we have BBC World Service, but it is such an important part of the media landscape around the world for people that you probably don't realize. There are people that depend on the BBC World Service in many weird places in the world, where you'd be surprised that people are listening to BBC World Service, and it is a really important part of our outward looking kind of, I'm going to use the word propaganda, but it's messaging for Britain, really. So yeah, really interesting. It's great that you bring up BBC World Service. I don't think most people in the UK have no idea what the BBC World Service does. And how important it is. Honestly, most people don't even know it exists. Right, Jeffrey, if they take Homs, so going to Syria, they have cut the Assad-controlled territory in two. Should be easy to take the coastline from there, which is bad news for the regime. I think the regime's days are numbered. Hence why I said earlier that this person has, his information guy has already flown to Dubai. Assad himself and his family are out. Russians seem to be packing up and getting their stuff to Tartus. The helicopters today were seen flying from Homs, getting out back to Damascus. So they're pulling out. I think it's just capitulation now. Honestly, it's game over. Viggo Holmson says the Russians will probably concentrate on defending Tartus, the naval base, and Damascus. Yeah, I completely agree. For as long as it takes to extricate themselves from the theatre, I would have thought. I don't know the writings on the wall there. Right, Mark Biscu, another Canadian legend. Olena and I are just wondering if you still fit into that Vishivanka, or do we need to order you another? Cheers, mate. Do you know what? I keep walking past it and say I need to wear that. I'm going to wear it tomorrow for you, Mark. God damn it! I'm so sorry I haven't worn it. It adorns my bookshelf. It is part of my background. I need to make it part of the foreground, Mark. Olena, tomorrow I'm going to look dapper just for you. I'm going to look Vishivanka superb. This can't do anything about that, but I can make this look pretty good. Okay. Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Olena. You are always too generous. Ronnie Franken, ATP Geopolitics, got to love the tension rise between Putin and Erdogan in Syria, the enemy of the enemy, etc., etc. I was talking about this the other day, Ronnie. Exactly that, which is Erdogan and Turkey are supporting one of the rebel factions in the north, and Russia obviously supporting the Assad regime. So they are against each other. You have literally got Turkish S-300s potentially shooting down Russian Sukhois or Ka-52 attack helicopters. It's such a weird situation, and yet out of that context, Erdogan's been kind of trying to cozy up to Putin. It's a really weird situation, but one that I think is good for Ukraine, for the world. We need Turkey to be unabashedly on the side of democracy. And the problem is Turkey's been democratically backsliding, moving away from the EU. They wanted to accede to the EU. Now they seem to want to join BRICS. Something like this could move them back in the direction of the West. Yeah. Okay. Benny, I know Cars for Ukraine. I had a chat with their founder last year. Benny, there you go. Have I not told you this yet, Benny? I only told JR last night as well, as we were talking about fundraising. I've literally only just, like, this is absolutely new, but thank you for being there, Benny. But anyway, sorry, I got lost there with something going on over there. Yeah, I'll talk about this. Hopefully we can make this happen. Right. Benjamin, is there any Russian reaction yet from Russia regarding their puppet losing the first round election win? Actually, no. Funnily enough, I don't think we've heard anything from Russia. Not that I've seen. Yeah, I don't think I've heard anything. I was expecting the guy to have been tonked in the second round anyway, because there was a coalescing around Lasconi, the centre right, but reform, pro EU, pro NATO choice that I think he would have been found out and probably would have. I mean, if you look at the presidential elections, which were 30 to 35% extremes, right? That's probably the maximum he would have got. But with all that bad publicity, I would have thought he probably would have got only around 25% tops. So I think he would have lost some of the people that voted for him before because they didn't really know who he was. Now, of course, you know, you're not going to get that, but he's not going to get any votes in all likelihood. But you'll probably get a similar reflection to the parliamentary votes in the presidential election, I would have thought as well. Yeah. What's the difference between superstition and religion, Putin puppet? Don't get me started on that, mate. There are plenty of people out here that would unsubscribe from the channel if I started banging on in those terms. Yeah. Hold your tongue, Piers. Hold your tongue. Mitch, Victor Davis Hansen is also one to add to the list. Great historian, but sadly knows very little about the genesis of the tensions in Ukraine. It's really frustrating when you get. I did that video earlier. I really liked doing that video. I know it's a long one, but I did. They all are mine, aren't they? But that video where I looked at the Piers Morgan panel, and we had Anastasia Paraskova on there, who was absolutely brilliant, and then Wesley Clark, General Wesley Clark, that put Scott Horton's claims to bed, really. But you know, when you have someone, and I would find it difficult if I was a historian, you know, we all bring our baggage and our lenses that we interpret the world through to whatever we do. And if I came to write a book, a historical book, I would have my view of what the world is and my biases and how I would want to see the world painted, and certain people that I might have intuitive affinity for, I might accidentally paint them in a better light, right? And we should always be aware of confirmation bias and the baggage we bring. But this is the case. You can have someone that is a really good in one area, and then you know, has a lack of knowledge in another area, but then is asked to cast opinions on that because they're a historian or whatever. And actually, so Timothy Snyder is someone that I like, because not only do I find myself agreeing with him politically and morally, but actually here's someone that has a deep knowledge of Ukraine. So what frustrates me is when you go and see like Joe Rogan interviewing people on Ukraine that aren't really the best people to interview on Ukraine, and then refusing to get Zelenskyy on. He needs someone like Timothy Snyder to go on his podcast and talk Ukraine, because he's a great communicator, Timothy Snyder. He's on point, and he's the right person that knows the right amount about the right things. Anyway, I digress. I'm not really sure if I'm answering your question, but yeah, it is an issue when you get experts casting their opinion who aren't really experts. And actually, I'd include Joe Rogan there. And Joe Rogan is the problem with Joe Rogan, there's some very many episodes of Joe Rogan that are brilliant, right? So you can have him talking to Brian Cox, right, about cosmology, and that's something that Joe Rogan's interested in. He's not an expert in, but it's not something you really need to challenge Brian Cox on. It's like, tell us how you think the universe started. Okay, that's really cool. Well, how about this? And then it's not like, oh no, I need to give you the other side of the story there, because it's not moral, it's not political, it's scientific, right? But when you are controlling the biggest podcast in the world, you have a responsibility to your audience not to misinform them and not to disinform them. And so when you have someone that is clearly spouting a pro-agenda position on anything, you either need to know enough about it yourself to push back, or do some research, like, just so you are prepared to push back. What frustrates me about Joe Rogan is he lets people come on, and then if he kind of likes what they're saying, so if it's like UFOs or stuff that you should be deeply skeptical about, like, he doesn't push back enough, and he does that with Ukraine, and he lets people say terrible things about Ukraine, and then he himself says F Zelenskyy, and then Zelenskyy says, hey, hang on, that's not cool, can I come on? And he says no. That is irresponsible. That is not good enough. So yeah, Joe Rogan, I think, is an irresponsible broadcaster that is nothing other than quite often an agenda driven or a platform that allows agendas to be driven onto it unchallenged. I watched a video just yesterday morning of a guy. So Elon Musk was on talking to Joe Rogan, and they were banging on about eating meat versus farming, and they was talking about how it makes no environmental impact and no kind of CO2 impact and blah blah blah. And this guy came on who was a bit of an expert in the field, and basically took to task every single thing that both people said. So that's wrong, and this is why that's wrong, and this is a response to that. And it was just a litany. And what the problem is with Elon Musk is you think that he's an expert because you think he's a scientist because of SpaceX and Tesla, but he's not. He's a freaking businessman that is not an expert in those subjects, and yet casts himself as an expert. And you can be forgiven for like being bowled over by what he says because he says it with confidence, but actually he's very often wrong. He's just a businessman that's invested in the right things at the right time. But he didn't design that rocket. He didn't design that battery pack for the Tesla. He didn't design those satellites. His people did that. He's a businessman, and we must remember that. And he's now the most powerful, rich businessman in the world. Just, we need to be far more skeptical of what pretty much everyone says, and that includes me, of course. Sorry, I'm banging on too much. I need to go and see my partner. Okay, what else? Who Finnish guy? Just thank you, Jonathan. My other cat saw Trump and knocked over my Christmas tree. Sorry about that. I'm from Estonia. I remember through the 90s how Russia kept saying how we would return to our rightful owners, which is exactly what they're saying from Ukraine. It's like, like you live through these things. Like, this is what frustrated me about Scott Horton on Piers Morgan, is that he was proclaiming to know these things about what caused the war in Ukraine without ever having visited Ukraine, not being able to speak Russian, etc., etc., etc. Not that I can speak Russian or whatever, but you had Anastasia on there saying, I was at the Maidan protest. I was there. I know why I protested, and I know why we all protested, and it's for this reason, this reason, this reason. And you're saying that that's not the case. What do you know? You weren't there. And then we had Wesley Clark on that saying, I was involved. I was working for NATO at the time, and I was involved in those conversations. So I'm paraphrasing, but don't come and tell me what was being discussed there and what the cause of X, Y, and Z was. I was there. I lived it. And I'm telling you, this is what happened. That's what happened. So you get Scott Horton writes a 775-page book that is essentially a whole load of BS. And what you need to do is ask people from Estonia and Lithuania and Latvia what their experience of Russia is like and why they wanted to join NATO. Not that NATO came knocking at their door, but they were the ones that phoned NATO. And this is the kind of the idea of NATO expansionism, that they went around the world saying, oh, can you join us? Can you join us? Can you join us? Because we all need you to fight together against Russia. NATO were going, actually, I don't want you to join us. It's a bit dodgy. You're well too close to Russia, and this could be a bit escalatory. But these guys really wanted to join NATO because it was their chance of getting a security, a long-term security going forward. And the whole theory of NATO expansionism being the cause of X, Y, and Z is just so problematic. You only need to go and speak to the people from these nations themselves. Anyway, thank you, InQ, for your comment. Jonathan says, InQ again, how much do you know about the Tuzla Island incident? Happened in 2003, more than 10 years before the NATO gay Jewish Nazi demon coup happened. I don't know anything, but I'm happy to find out, so I'll have to look into that. Or you can please let me know in the comments. Just not now, I don't have time. But thank you for your comment. Dr. Battery, all right, mates. Thank you for your super sticker. Great to have you on board, dude. Really appreciate your support. Keith Kane, good to hear from you. ATP Geopolitics, thank you for your hard work and dedication for Ukraine and the truth. It is a dangerous obsession I have that is leaving me with no life outside of this. But do you know what? Thanks for being here with me, guys. I really appreciate it. Joe Hales, thank you very much. Keep going, my JP. Thanks, Joe, and always a great supporter of the channel. Joe is. Thank you. So almost there. Dr. Battery gifted 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thank you, Dr. Battery, for both of your supportingness there. Words difficult for me. And JR, who is busily behind the scenes, thank you for giving me these comments, JR. Musk only has 2 bachelors and not a master or a PhD. So there you go. And I'd imagine, not in the areas that he has, that he casts his opinion on. Now, I cast my opinion on lots of areas I don't have expertise in, but I have at least some kind of epistemic humility, which means that hopefully I'm humble enough to say, look, it's just my opinion, take it with a pinch of salt. I often say that because we should. I need to communicate to you that I'm not an expert in the things I talk about here. Like I'm an autodidact, which is like I've taught myself this stuff. I don't have formal geopolitical qualifications and military qualifications. So yeah, I am just a random, that's why I keep saying I'm a random guy sitting on my fat ass on the south coast of the UK. But I don't hear people like Elon Musk say that as they make these they profess these huge conclusions on things that they're not experts on. But they have such cultish followings that their followings, the audience, and that will expand to Joe Rogan. So anything Joe Rogan's audience hears on a Joe Rogan show, they're much more likely to take on board uncritically. And you just got dangerous opinions being spread on all sorts of things that may affect the environment, the politics, whatever it is that in this case Elon Musk is casting his opinion on. So yeah, there you go. Anyway, that's enough from me. I desperately need to. Oh no, I've got more. Not oh no, thanks, Mitch. You've got another one from Mitch here. Have I missed some more out? Mitch, thanks, buddy. Right, so Mitch says. FYI, I'm unsubscribing when you hit 50,138. Then wait until you hit 50,138 again before resubbing. Why? You ask just because. My favorite comment of the day. I want to reach 50,139 by January the 2nd because I really like arbitrary numbers. I'm not 50,000 doesn't bother me, but 50,139 is clearly a better number. And I'm not doing it by end of December 31st. It's January the 2nd. Please help me do that. Please press subscribe. But I love the fact that Mitch should just be waiting on the computer, just looking constantly at my dashboard, going, "He's almost there." And then unsubscribing, and then being the one, and then I will shower Mitch with all sorts of positive commendations for his legendaryness. Anyway, that's enough absolute abject nonsense from me. Thank you so much for all of your support, guys. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the team that has assembled. God, it sounds like you guys are Avengers or something. This team that's assembled here, it's a wonderful community, and I really do appreciate you. And thank you for all the kind words that you're saying. Finish guy, that's very kind. Jonathan has taught himself well because he analyzes his analyses are generally better than those of many military experts. I wouldn't have a clue whether that is indeed true. I doubt it. But yes, I mean, some things, a lot of it is common sense, isn't it? But yeah, we learn and think. Here's something to leave you with, guys. Just think how much we have learned together in 3 years of following this war, in terms of how different military pieces of equipment work, what tactics there are, tactics, operation, strategy, all of these things. What we know now about Georgia, the geography of Ukraine, what a Vyshyvanka is, what Rasputitsa is, all the things we never knew 3 years ago. This has been an absolute learning experience for us all, and I think well done to us for engaging in what I think is incredibly important for us all, for the future of the world, and obviously for the future of Ukraine. And indeed, it's really important that we continue to do so. Mick Dundee, that's not a knife. This is a knife. Much respect from Melbourne, Australia. Fun fact, I worked in a pizza restaurant on Brunswick Road in Melbourne in 1996. Wood oven pizza restaurant. I met a guy, he got me into the Talking Heads. Melbourne, the Prince of Wales pub, that was good. I stayed in the Backpackers just next to the Prince of Wales pub. Oh, I've got fond memories of Melbourne. I used to go water skiing and wakeboarding in Port Phillip in the bay there, because I had some mates out in Frankston who had a speedboat. You're a backpacker. I fell on. I was very lucky, and just met really cool people that enabled me to have really great experiences. And yeah, just going. Although I look back now and think we were at dusk, like water skiing and donutting and stuff and wakeboarding. And I was just thinking, that's white shark territory there. Like, surely Port Phillip dusk, like cold water of Melbourne. I wonder, am I lucky to be alive? Well, I guess I am. Anyway, that's enough. Rabbiting on. Brunswick is a great drinking area. Yes, good times there. Good times. Anyway, I need to go. Take care, everybody. Really appreciate it. Otherwise, it's going to be like backpacking anecdotes all night. I've got Georgian wine to drink, Slava Ukraini, and spare a thought for Georgia and the protesters who are out on the cold night like tonight, doing what is right for them, but also in not a small way for us all in fighting the growing sense of autocracy, the creeping autocracy that is stretching its tendrils around the world at present. So spare a thought for them. Thanks, Georgia. Good wine. Toodle pits.